This is Tanner Johnson. Some folks call me the Tunnel Rat. It's coming up on 2100 hours Eastern Standard Time, and if you're hearing this, you're listening to the last functional broadcast I know of in New York City. And maybe, just maybe, we're the last broadcast left in the country. I don't say that to be dramatic, I say it because it might be true. It's been, I don't even know, months since this whole thing started. The date up top on my battered old MacBook here reads October 2nd, 2027, but that might not be the real date. Power surges scrambled everything once the grid went down, and I'm using a generator that's on its last legs. Could be earlier, could be later. Hard to keep track in the dark, but I try to maintain something close to standard time for the sake of my own sanity. Also helps me keep schedule for these nightly broadcasts. I'm coming to you live from somewhere beneath Manhattan. If you're out there, if you still have a working receiver, keep it tuned here. The frequency is 530 AM, the bottom of your AM dial. This is WQJR, or what's left of it, relaying from a hidden station we've set up using old NYPD equipment. We rigged some cables to the subterranean phone lines. It's a miracle we can push a signal out at all. I know some of you are new, stumbling across my voice by spinning a dial in a cold apartment or a silent car. You might be from Queens, or maybe you made it out of Newark. Or you're one of the quiet survivors holed up in a residential building in Brooklyn. Maybe you're not even in the city. The old station antenna I salvaged from the top of the Empire State Building can broadcast a fair distance, if the environment is right. Let me fill you in on who I am. My name is Tanner Johnson. I'm 33 years old. I used to work for the MTA as a signals manager. My job was to monitor the labyrinth of tracks, third rails, and power lines that feed the New York City subway system. When everything started falling apart, I was down in these tunnels right on the clock. I saw, well, let's call it the beginning. Saw the meltdown. I can still picture that moment. The overhead lights flickering, the ominous rumble of distant blasts, the powerless trains stuck on the tracks. The voices screaming topside. The MTA tried to issue an evacuation order, but it was too late. Far too late. I made my way deeper underground with a handful of colleagues. Some construction folks, a few transit police officers, a couple from the city's old maintenance crew. When the infected took over Times Square and most of Midtown, we realized we had two choices: climb up into the chaos or hide below and hope for rescue. We turned these tunnels into our refuge. We set up sleeping quarters. We barricaded ourselves behind steel maintenance doors. For a while, we survived on whatever we could scrape together from abandoned vending machines, government food drops, and leftover MREs from the National Guard. It was never a pleasant existence, but hey, it kept us breathing. Months have passed, or maybe it's been a year. I lost track. Some folks left to search for family or to try to find better supplies. Some folks never came back. A few got sick. Others, well, sometimes the tunnels aren't as safe as we want them to be. The infected don't always stay above ground. But we keep pushing. That's the key. Keep pushing. I call this broadcast Signals from the Underground. It started as a nightly status update for my group of survivors. We rigged some old radio equipment that was left over from an NYPD communications center near City Hall. I realized that maybe we could reach more than just our own. Maybe we could find other survivors. So I put out the call. If you can hear me, you're not alone. We're still alive. We're fighting. I have to warn you, though, if you're traveling, use your head. The city isn't what it used to be. Places like Penn Station, Grand Central Terminal, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, most major crossings, are extremely risky. The power grid is in ruins, and structural damage is everywhere. The worst part? The infected move in large groups near the iconic locations because that's where people tried to gather when it all came down. Food caches were set up there, evacuations were attempted there, and that means those areas became prime feeding grounds. I'll pass along all the intel I have, but it may be outdated. The situation shifts every day. If you do go topside, take note of how the infected move. They don't run like they did at the start. Many have deteriorated physically. But don't let your guard down. Their instincts remain, and they're stronger than you might think. If they catch your scent or hear a noise, they'll come for you. I want to share a bit of official info too. When everything went public, the CDC out of Atlanta identified the pathogen as a mutated form of an old virus they were studying. The Department of Defense, in conjunction with the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, tried to produce a vaccine. Some prototypes were distributed in major cities, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. But they barely slowed the infection rate. Rumor has it that other countries attempted quarantines of major U.S. ports and airports. I can't confirm any of that, though. Communication with the outside world is basically gone. My own theory? The virus spreads primarily through bites or direct contact with bodily fluids, but there have been unconfirmed reports of airborne transmission in the early stages. That was the real kicker. The city's dense population made it a perfect breeding ground. Social distancing, if you remember that term from the old days, was a laughable notion in a place like Manhattan. It's not that people didn't try, they did, but the infection rate skyrocketed. Then the tri-state area collapsed so quickly that no systematic evacuation could help. If you want to know why the rest of the country didn't come in force to save us, I suspect it's because they had their own problems. No matter what the cause, I can tell you what it's like now. A ghost city overhead, the hum of a few emergency generators in corners of Manhattan that still have a little power, scattered pockets of the infected, and survivors like me trying to hold on to hope. Now, let's talk about how we're managing power. We have an old diesel generator that was left behind by a military engineering unit. We also installed some solar panels in a carefully hidden spot on a rooftop near City Hall. The solar panels charge a battery bank. Without that, we wouldn't have enough juice to run these broadcasts every night. I try to limit the broadcast to half an hour at a time, but sometimes I go longer if I think more people are listening. If you ever hear the broadcast cut out unexpectedly, that means we lost power or had to shut down fast. If we get overrun, well, you'll know. Weapons. People ask me about weapons. I'm not an expert, but I can tell you that a small group of National Guard troops once passed through our station. They left behind a crate of M4 carbines, 9mm sidearms, and some ammunition. Enough to defend ourselves. If you find yourself in possession of a firearm, please, only use it if you have no other choice. Sound is the biggest liability in this city. A single gunshot can echo through the streets, drawing attention from every corner. A quieter alternative, if you must protect yourself, is a crossbow or a sturdy blunt instrument. But the main rule in this city is to avoid contact. Staying out of sight beats confrontation any day. Before I go any further, let me see if we're still broadcasting. The needle is bouncing. Good. I want to take a moment to read some of the messages I've received. Yes, we actually get messages. We rigged up an old text-to-speech system connected to an emergency server. If someone in the city stumbles across a working net terminal or an old phone line, they might be able to send a message to our station's backup server. Don't ask me how all the technical details work. Our friend Daryl was the genius behind that. He used to be a software engineer, once employed by a local tech startup. Let's see what we've got. Message 1. This is Erica. I'm holed up in a building near Union Square. Ran out of supplies last week, no signs of help. If you're out there, do you have any info on safe corridors? Erica, if you're listening, I don't know of any truly safe corridors, but rumor has it that some survivors cleared out a path along 14th Street east toward the FDR Drive. They were using that route to access the East River. However, that might be heavily patrolled by the infected now. If you can make it to the L train tunnel, you could try heading west underground and then up to 8th Avenue. A group calling themselves the Midtown Holdouts is rumored to operate near the old Port Authority bus terminal. No promises. It might be deserted. Or worse. But it's a lead. Message 2. Tanner, this is Marcus from Bay Ridge. We've got a small community here. Are you seeing the same things we are? Like the infected wandering in packs at night but barely visible during the day? Marcus, yes. We've noticed that pattern for a while. It started a few weeks after the crisis began. There's a theory that it has something to do with the virus making the infected more sensitive to sunlight. Or maybe they simply rest during the day. If you have to move, do it during daylight hours. It's still dangerous, but the hordes are less active. Message 3. Any updates on the rest of the country? Is DC still there? Is the government intact? Wish I had an answer. Last I heard, Washington, D.C. was partially evacuated. The White House was presumably moved to an undisclosed location. The official news broadcast from the Capitol went silent after the same wave of infections tore through the city. I don't want to spread rumors, so I'll just say, no, I can't confirm any official government presence. I imagine they're still out there somewhere, but they aren't broadcasting. Time to share an update from my perspective. We recently tried to scavenge the area around the Brooklyn Bridge. The walkway and the surrounding streets are in rough shape. Collapsed roads, shattered windows, burned cars blocking lanes. The infected are thick in that area. We saw them feeding on old supply drop containers near the Manhattan entrance of the bridge. We lost 2 people from our group in that attempt. We retreated back to the tunnels empty-handed. Honestly, seeing the bridge in its current state was a gut punch. I used to stroll across that bridge as a tourist attraction, enjoying the view of Manhattan's skyline. Now it's a scene of wreckage. If you're heading that way, proceed with extreme caution or don't go at all. Still with me, folks? Let me talk a bit about the global situation, or what little I know of it. Early in the crisis, I heard from a cargo ship captain anchored off the coast of Staten Island. He said the port of Newark had been overrun and that no reinforcements were coming in from overseas. The captain was part of a small merchant fleet that tried to take on refugees, but they ended up with infected on board. He quarantined them below deck, but eventually lost control. The ship went silent. That was about 2 months back. I also recall that the International Red Cross tried to set up safe zones in major ports around the world. Places like Rotterdam in the Netherlands, Busan in South Korea, and Melbourne in Australia. No clue if those efforts succeeded. The rumor on the ham radio circuit is that some countries managed to contain the spread by implementing martial law quickly. That's speculation, so don't quote me on it. But if you're listening from outside the States, maybe from Canada, Mexico, or somewhere across the ocean, I hope you're safe. I wish I had more concrete intel. Let's pivot to some personal stories. The one question I get most often, besides, where can I find clean water, is, how do you stay hopeful, Tanner? My answer, I don't always. Sometimes I'm as down as it gets, but I have to believe that as long as we're breathing, there's a chance to rebuild, to find others, to create pockets of civilization, or if nothing else, a chance to survive one more day. I hold on to small things, memories of real coffee, morning sunlight in Central Park, the sound of children laughing in the playgrounds near my old place in Astoria. If you're old enough to remember a world without this crisis, cling to those memories. If you're young, and I know some kids might be out there scared, listen close. This is not how the world is supposed to be. We had normalcy once. We had sports, holidays, birthdays. We had school. We had hope. Don't let the current darkness make you forget that. People often share stories with me about near misses or breathtaking escapes. Not long ago, I got a message from a paramedic named Roxanne, who managed to rescue a group of stranded tourists near Times Square by leading them through the 42nd Street shuttle tunnels. She described the route in detail, how she used the old MTA break rooms to hide from the infected. She even revived a wounded man who had lost a lot of blood. They made it through. Stories like that keep me going. Let's check the time. We're about 18 minutes into the broadcast. The generator's humming along. If you're hearing a buzz, that's the ancient wiring. We do what we can. I'll keep going for a bit. Let's shift gears to some practical survival tips. Folks ask me, Tanner, how do you move through the city? How do you avoid making noise? For me, it's about caution and patience. Gear check. Make sure everything is secure and won't rattle. If you have a backpack, tie down loose straps. Avoid metal water bottles that clank, or keep them wrapped in cloth. Footwear. Wear shoes with soft soles. Heavy boots are loud. You might feel more protected than big boots, but the sound could alert threats from a block away. Route planning. Memorize the city grid if you can. You never want to wander aimlessly. Stick to roads or tunnels you know are less likely to be crowded with infected. Buddy system. If you have a small group, consider traveling in pairs. One person can scout ahead while the other watches the rear. Light discipline. Use flashlights sparingly. If you can travel during daylight, assuming you can find a route that isn't full of infected, do so. Night travel is risky because of limited visibility, but the infected's heightened sense of hearing can also be a problem during the day. Balance your approach. Hydration, nutrition. Dehydration will slow you down, both physically and mentally. Always carry water or a way to purify it. New York's water supply used to be top-notch. Now you might find that some water mains still run, but I'd boil or filter everything. As for food, shelf-stable items like canned goods or sealed snacks are best. Medical supplies. If you find a pharmacy or clinic that hasn't been completely ransacked, look for bandages, disinfectant, pain relievers, any antibiotics you can find. Minor infections can become lethal if untreated. Now, on the matter of the infection, if someone in your group is bitten, the unfortunate truth is that there's no proven cure. I'm aware that's harsh news, but you need the facts. Some folks have tried removing the infected limb or applying immediate disinfectant. There are stories, unverified, of survivors who fought off the illness with antibiotics or an experimental vaccine. I can't confirm any of that. All I can say is, be extremely cautious. We set up a screening procedure in our subterranean hideout. Before anyone can enter our main living area, they have to undergo a check for wounds, contamination, or suspicious symptoms. We also have a quarantine chamber. An old maintenance shaft sealed with thick metal doors. If someone appears to be infected, we place them there with provisions. It's grim, but it protects the rest of us. Let's talk about the layout of the tunnels. The New York City subway system is among the largest in the world, with hundreds of miles of mainline track and thousands if we count every switch track and side route. Tunnels run beneath the entire city, linking Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Some lines, like the A/C/E, cut right through the heart of Manhattan. Others, like the 7 train, connect Manhattan and Queens. The G train runs between Brooklyn and Queens, not touching Manhattan. If you want to move around underground, do so with a map or a knowledgeable guide. Flooded sections and cave-ins are common. We discovered that the deeper you go, like certain portions of the 2/3 line near Clark Street, the more likely you'll encounter collapsed ceilings or standing water. Also, some sections are pitch black, with no emergency lighting left at all. The third rail is mostly unpowered now, but never assume anything. If a random generator or substation is still active, that rail can carry up to 600 volts DC. Touch it, and it's game over. I've got some personal intel that the number 6 line might still be partially intact up near the Bronx. Heard a rumor from a person named Adam. He claimed that north of the 125th Street station, a group of survivors is living in the tunnel, using old train cars as shelter. If you can confirm that, or if you're part of that group, let me know. The city is big enough for multiple safe zones. Let's see if we have more messages. Message 4. Hey Tanner. This is Officer Delgado from the 9th Precinct in the East Village. We've secured a block around East 5th Street. If any survivors are in the neighborhood, look for the barricade with blue tarps and the word HOPE painted on it. We have medical supplies and limited space for refugees. Officer Delgado, that's a bold move. Broadcasting your location could draw unwanted attention, but I get it. You want to help people. Everyone, if you're near East 5th Street, approach carefully. I don't know how secure the area is, but it's at least a potential lifeline. Message 5. To the radio host in the tunnels, we hear you in southwestern Brooklyn. We've seen National Guard choppers overhead at night. Any idea if they're performing rescue missions or just scouting? That's news to me. I haven't seen or heard any helicopters for weeks. If they're up there, it might be a private group or a rogue military unit scanning for pockets of survivors, or searching for resources. I can't say for sure, but if you see them, try to signal with light or radio if you can do so safely. Some folks have asked about reaching out beyond the city. I still occasionally attempt to contact other frequencies. 121.5 megahertz, the civilian emergency frequency. 243.0 megahertz, the military emergency frequency. And the standard ham radio bands. So far, I've only encountered static and the faint echoes of automated beacons. No official government or rescue transmissions. If you have better luck, let me know. You might wonder, is it even worth staying in New York? I can't answer that for everyone. Some might choose to flee, heading north into upstate territory or trying to reach New England. But traveling long distances is a gamble. Gasoline is scarce. Roads are choked with abandoned vehicles. Bridges are compromised. And then you have to worry about infected populations in smaller towns along the way. For some, it's safer to find or build a stable refuge right here. I know that might sound crazy. This city is infamous for its infected presence. But at least we know the terrain. We know every tunnel, every alley, every resource cache. We can adapt. Let me share a personal reflection. I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. Came to the city for college and never left. My mother used to tell me, Tanner, New York will chew you up and spit you out. Well, it tried, but I love the energy and diversity of this place. Even now, with everything that's happened, part of me still admires it. I look at the skyline, shattered windows and dark silhouettes though it may be, and I remember what it was. There's a certain stubborn pride in not giving up on it. I want to keep the lines open for a moment in case anyone else tries to break in. I have the receiver on standby. If you're listening and want to reach me, try transmitting on 530 AM, or if you can, on the ham band at 146.520 megahertz. I'm scanning all night. No new voices. That's all right. Let's press on. There's a question I keep getting. Tanner, what do the infected act like now? We've noticed changes. They're slower, mostly, but they still gather in large groups when roused. They've lost coordination, though, so they tend to wander aimlessly unless provoked by sound or the smell of living humans. They have trouble climbing obstacles like walls or fences, but stairs are no real barrier. We've also seen unusual clusters near areas that used to be heavily populated, like hospitals or major intersections. It's possible they linger where they once found abundant prey. It's also possible something else draws them. Some leftover instinct. An echo of old patterns. Hard to say. I also want to note that we've found minimal evidence of animal infection. Some dogs and cats roam the streets. They seem skittish but not infected. We had rumors early on about certain animal species carrying or even transmitting the virus, but I haven't seen proof. In any case, if you find a stray animal, approach carefully. They might be traumatized and could bite out of fear. Let me shift to a larger update on city infrastructure. Water lines in some parts of the city still have minimal flow, especially around certain main lines maintained by the Department of Environmental Protection. Electricity is mostly gone, except for a few spots powered by local generators. The power grid collapsed when the staff at major plants either evacuated or were overrun. That's why we rely on portable or improvised power solutions. Earlier tonight, I tried to raise the old Con Edison emergency line. Got nothing but a recorded message. If you're trying to fix or restore local power, be aware that many substations are offline, possibly damaged beyond repair. You'd need a full team of trained technicians and a safe environment to attempt any large-scale reboot of the grid. It's not happening anytime soon. Now let's talk about communication with the outside world. If you manage to find a working satellite phone, that's your best shot, but I haven't seen one in ages. Even if you did, the ground stations might not be operational. Some amateur radio satellites might still pass overhead, but you'd need specialized gear to use them. Let me tell you about a run I made just yesterday. I heard rumors of a Red Cross supply depot near the old Javits Center. Went topside through a maintenance hatch on 34th Street. The place was a wreck. Broken glass, overturned trucks, the smell of old fires. But I did find a few crates labeled with the Red Cross emblem inside the lobby. Someone had busted them open already. Took the medical supplies, but left behind blankets and water filters. I grabbed what I could carry, quietly as possible. Just as I was leaving, a group of infected lurched in from 11th Avenue. I saw them through the shattered windows. I'd guess about 10 or 12. It was broad daylight, but they still moved toward the noise of me rummaging. I hid behind a large piece of rubble, barely daring to breathe. They shuffled past, sniffing the air. One of them wore a tattered EMS uniform. It made me wonder if, in some corner of their mind, they still recognized their old job. Probably not. Eventually, they wandered off. I made it back to the tunnels. Close call, but at least I brought back some filters and a few other supplies. Why do I tell these stories? So you know it can be done. We can still scavenge. We can still survive. It's risky, yes, but not impossible. If you move slowly, quietly, and plan ahead, you can slip through. Let's do another message check. Message 6. This is Connor, broadcasting from a ham radio in the Bronx. We've got a holdout in a former community center near Yankee Stadium. Our supplies are running low, but we have a safe perimeter. If you're near the area and can help, we'd be grateful. Connor, if you're still up there, watch out near the stadium parking garages. Last we knew, those decks were infested with infected. They like enclosed spaces. It's dark, and plenty of corners for them to hide. But if you can maintain a perimeter, hold tight. Maybe some folks listening in can organize a supply run. Message 7. Heard rumors of a boat still operating in the East River. Any truth? I've heard the same rumor, but I have no confirmation. Some mention an old ferry used by a group from the Lower East Side. If it's true, that might be a way to travel. But keep in mind, the water itself could be hazardous. Abandoned vessels, floating debris, and who knows what else. We're about 30 minutes in now. The generator's still good, surprisingly. Let's keep going a bit. I'd like to share some knowledge about potential rescue attempts. If the National Guard or military come back, they'll likely do so in large convoys or with heavy air support. If you see lone choppers or small squads, they're probably independent or part of a remnant force. Not to dash hopes, but I haven't seen a full-scale rescue operation in months. What about the future? If you're one of the folks trying to rebuild or even just keep a small community alive, I salute you. People talk about restarting civilization. That's a tall order, but it starts with the basics. Stable shelter, a consistent food and water source, and trust among members. If you can secure an area, even a single block, and defend it from the infected, you can plant small gardens, collect rainwater, and start bartering with other pockets of survivors. That's how communities will form. Hard? Absolutely, but not impossible. I know these updates can be bleak, but I also want to end each broadcast with a spark of hope. So here's my spark for tonight. A few days ago, I ran into an old friend from the MTA days, Cynthia, a signals technician I hadn't seen since before the crisis. She was alive and well, leading a group of 6 survivors. She told me they were using the old signals office near 59th and Lexington to monitor parts of the grid. They had a little radio station rigged up, scanning for transmissions. That's how she found me. We exchanged supplies and parted ways, but not before promising to stay in contact. That's not just random good luck. That's proof that people can still find each other, help each other. So if you're out there, never doubt that there are others. You might be alone in a dark room listening to this broadcast, but trust me, you're not the only one left. Hello again, everyone. Tanner Johnson, the Tunnel Rat, reporting on 530 AM. If you're tuning in right now, I welcome you back to Signals from the Underground. It's about 2100 hours Eastern Standard Time, at least by my best estimate, and I'm still broadcasting from deep below Manhattan. If you're new to these transmissions, I've been coming on the air each evening with updates, survival tips, and any glimmer of hope I can scrounge up in this changed world. Last time I signed off, I told you about reconnecting with an old friend, Cynthia, a signals technician from the MTA days. I caught her alive, and well over at the old signals office near 59th and Lexington. She's got a small group of 6 survivors and some working equipment that helps them monitor portions of the power grid. Our meeting was one of those rare moments where you realize there's more to life than just hiding in the dark. Maybe we can all weave together a small network of trust and cooperation. Before I jump into tonight's news, let me remind you, keep your frequency locked here on 530 AM, or, if you're fiddling with ham radios, you can sometimes catch me on 146.520 MHz, though that's less reliable. My equipment is a patchwork of battered hardware, cables, and luck. Any day now it could give out. But as long as it runs, I'll be here. So after broadcasting that last message, I managed to get some rest. But early this morning, dawn by my watch, I picked up a faint signal. It took a good half hour of scanning to isolate it, and even then I only got bits and pieces. Turns out it was Cynthia. She's rigged her own transmitter to a short-range directional antenna. Since she knows how the city's signal cables are laid out, she discovered a way to boost her broadcast within a 3 or 4 block radius. Of course, she's nowhere near as lucky as we are with our big AM tower hooked up to the old Empire State Building rig, but local coverage is better than none. Through the static, Cynthia relayed that her group was starting to run low on certain critical items, medical gear mostly. She asked if I had spare bandages, antibiotic ointment, or even basic pain relief. The problem is that the supply run I attempted last week at the Javits Center only yielded water filters and blankets. My little community here beneath the city has a handful of first aid kits, but we've used up most of our advanced medical stock over the past few months. Still, I told her we'd do our best to help. If nothing else, I can direct them to the pockets in the city where I believe some pharmacies might still hold supplies. Maybe we can coordinate a run. That's the beauty of finding each other. We can share knowledge, share burdens, and maybe keep each other from stepping into the worst spots. Cynthia also mentioned that her group encountered another band of survivors crossing from the east side toward Midtown. They only spoke briefly, enough to share the usual warnings about the major thoroughfares being dangerous. It's proof that even in the middle of this crisis, people are moving around, forging new connections and trying to piece together a semblance of community. I also picked up a shortwave message from a group out in Brooklyn, specifically near Prospect Park. They claim to have cleared several buildings on the park's southwest corner, turning them into a fortified area. According to their broadcast, they're calling it the Greenlight Enclave. They've set up watchtowers on the rooftops and have apparently planted vegetables in an old greenhouse. A greenhouse in the city makes sense if it was part of a community garden project before the crisis. If it's still functional, that might be a real game changer. Fresh produce is a dream in these times. They said if you can make it there safely and you have some skill or resource to share, they'll consider letting you join. But you must pass a quarantine period and medical check to ensure you're not infected. That's fair. If any of you listening are near Prospect Park, keep an eye out for signs of this Greenlight Enclave. I have no direct proof it's real, but the mention of a rooftop watchtower aligns with rumors I heard last month about some folks using scaffolding and old billboard frames near Prospect Park to secure vantage points. Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Or in this case, maybe a real refuge. Now, I want to share something that happened just yesterday. I left our underground base to do a supply reconnaissance around City Hall. That area is dicey. Lots of official buildings, which were high traffic zones in the early days of the outbreak. People sought help from the government, crowded the halls, set up makeshift shelters, and you know what that means? A lot of them never got out. Even so, I heard a rumor of an NYPD supply cache left behind when the department partially evacuated. I went topside through a maintenance hatch near Center Street. As soon as I emerged, I smelled that stale odor of old smoke and decay that's come to define the city. The sunlight was bright. My eyes took a moment to adjust. The intersection was littered with wrecked squad cars, an abandoned city bus, and piles of trash. I stayed low, hugging the walls of the building. The air was eerily silent except for a faint wind whistling through shattered windows. I managed to get inside one of the old precinct outposts near City Hall. The doors were unlocked, probably forced open months ago. My heart was in my throat, expecting any moment to come face to face with a group of infected. But the place seemed deserted. Broken desks, scattered paperwork, spent shell casings. The walls had bullet holes, suggesting this place saw more than a few last stands. In a back room, I found a locked steel cabinet with the NYPD logo. Took me a solid 10 minutes of fiddling with a pry bar, but I got it open. Inside was a small stash of MREs, meal ready to eat, some half-empty boxes of 9mm ammo, and a few stun devices. Nothing spectacular, but it's better than leaving empty-handed. I pocketed what I could and carefully made my way back outside. Here's where things got tense. Across the street, near the base of the Brooklyn Bridge, a cluster of infected had gathered, maybe 4 or 5. They were just wandering around, making those unsettling sighs and quiet moans, which always make the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. One had a shredded business suit, another had a backpack. It's always unnerving to see them because part of you wonders who they used to be, where they used to work, what families they might have had. I had to cross that area to reach my maintenance hatch. If I tried to skirt around them, I'd risk entering on other infested streets, so I waited, hidden behind the corner of a building. Prayed they'd shuffle off. After about 15 agonizing minutes, they moved east, disappearing around a bend toward the water. With my path clear, I darted back underground, heart pounding like I'd run a marathon. Why share this story? Because I want you to know that scavenging can still yield small wins, but it comes with big risks. If you're out there trying to do the same, plan your route. Watch your surroundings and never, ever let your guard down. Around midday, I caught another short broadcast from Cynthia. She and her group scouted the Lexington Avenue subway station near 59th Street in an attempt to find a safer route to Grand Central Terminal. They didn't make it far. Lots of debris, collapsed tunnels, signs of large infected gatherings deeper down. She said they retreated without any real progress, but no casualties, which is a victory in itself. Interestingly, Cynthia mentioned that they picked up fleeting radio chatter from someone claiming to be north of Central Park, possibly around the Museum of Natural History or the Dakota building. The voice was too faint to understand. If that was you, or if you're operating from the Upper West Side, let me know. We'd love to confirm you're out there. She also said her group discovered a stash of battery packs in a hardware store on Lexington. Lithium-ion, apparently. If they can safely transport them back to their signals office, that they can store more power for nighttime broadcasts or emergency lights. That's the kind of small improvement that can make a huge difference in morale. I've been hearing rumors about something going down in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. Multiple transmissions mention loud noises, possibly explosions, on or near 42nd Street. No one has concrete details, but if you're planning to travel near Times Square or the Port Authority bus terminal, exercise extreme caution. One theory is that a group of survivors tried to demolish part of a building to block off the infected, or maybe to trap them in a controlled collapse. Another theory is that an old gas line ignited. In any case, the infected in that region might be stirred up. Times Square has always been a hotspot. Early on, it became a mass evacuation zone, so it's crawling with infected. If something big just went down, that area could be swarming even more than usual. I'd avoid it unless you have absolutely no other choice. I promise to keep sharing survival tips. Tonight, let's talk about mental health. Yes, it's a survival tip. In a world like this, the fight isn't just physical. It's psychological. Despair and fatigue can be just as deadly as any threat outside your door. Namtar, create a routine. Even if you're living in a hidden corner of a broken city, try to establish a daily schedule. When you wake, when you eat, when you keep watch, and when you rest. Familiar patterns help anchor the mind. Stay connected. If you have even a flicker of communication, radio, small group gatherings, or distant messages, stay in touch. Isolation can lead to paranoia. Hearing a voice on the other end of a transmission can remind you that humanity persists. Find small joys. This might sound strange in an apocalypse, but small positives, like a warm cup of coffee, if you can find any, a favorite song on a functioning MP3 player, or a brief glimpse of the sun, can recharge your spirit. Don't overlook them. Help others. The more you extend a hand to those in need, the more you remember that you're human, not just a survivor. Compassion can be a powerful force in grim times. Regulate fear. Fear keeps you cautious, but too much paralyzes you. When you feel that dread creeping in, ground yourself. Remind yourself of your skill, your knowledge, and your ability to adapt. You've made it this far. There's a reason for that. I want to address the concept of daylight scouting. Many survivors prefer to move during daytime, citing better visibility. The infected, while still present, sometimes seem less animated in full sunlight, though that's not a guarantee of safety. Others argue that nighttime movement is better for stealth, but that in turn can be terrifying due to low visibility and the infected's acute hearing. My recommendation? If you know your route and can do so quietly, daytime might be marginally safer, especially if you're traveling in small numbers. Nighttime can mask your approach, but if you're cornered, you'll have a hard time seeing potential escapes. Always weigh the pros and cons based on your surroundings and your group's capabilities. A quick station update. Our main diesel generator is starting to fail more frequently. I can't say I'm surprised. It's been months since we've done any proper maintenance beyond basic oil checks. Diesel fuel itself is getting harder to come by and the filters are nearly clogged. We rely mostly on an array of salvaged batteries and a set of solar panels that we keep on a building rooftop near City Hall. But solar is tricky in a city full of tall shadows and potentially overcast skies. We do what we can. If this generator finally gives out and we can't fix or replace it, our broadcasts may become much more sporadic, limited to whenever we can harvest enough solar energy or pedal power from a bike generator. I'm giving you a heads up now, so that if one day you tune in and hear nothing but static, you'll know we're battling equipment troubles, or worse. About an hour before tonight's broadcast, I heard something echoing down the subway tunnel. It sounded almost like metal scraping metal, followed by faint footfalls. This wasn't the typical slow shuffle or groan of the infected. It had a steady rhythm. Could be survivors passing by, or it could be someone, or something, trying to get into our part of the tunnels. I grabbed a flashlight and moved quietly through the corridor, following the sound. The tunnels down here are a maze of utility rooms, old track lines, storage alcoves, and service doors. The overhead lights have been dead for a long time, so it's pitch black. I found nothing. Eventually, the noise stopped. It might have been a sign of survivors who don't want to announce themselves, or simply the underground settling, or perhaps an animal. But if it's a group scoping us out, I hope they realize we're not a threat. Our group typically welcomes travelers as long as they're not aggressive and, of course, not infected. It's one reason I keep broadcasting our presence, to show that we're open to cooperation. That said, in times like these, not everyone out there has peaceful intentions. I'll keep you posted if I learn more. This next part is peculiar. About 2 days ago, I picked up a faint automated broadcast on the old emergency alert system frequency. It looped a message referencing the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, instructing survivors to head to certain coordinates in upstate New York. The coordinates repeated several times, then the message ended abruptly. I tried to cross-reference the coordinates on an offline map. Looks like they point somewhere near West Point, the famous military academy. Could that be a real safe zone or command center? Possibly. However, that message could be months old, a leftover from the early days of the outbreak. Or it could be a trap or simply a defunct site. I don't want to give false hope. If any of you have tested that lead, let me know. We've been relatively fortunate with weather these last few weeks. Mild days, cool nights, but I can feel the chill setting in. I'm no meteorologist, but I'd wager we're heading into a colder season. That raises new challenges. Without stable electricity or heating, nights can become harsh. If you're in a building, you can insulate windows with blankets or cardboard. If you're in the tunnels, the temperature might remain relatively stable, but it can still drop in the deeper sections. Collect warm clothing if you stumble across it. In the early days, people might have ignored coats and jackets, focusing on food and ammo. But trust me, hypothermia can take you down as effectively as any threat out there. I keep a few layers of old sweatshirts and a sleeping bag near my bunk. Better safe than sorry. I know many of you tune in hoping for a clue as to when and how this nightmare ends. I wish I had an answer. Maybe a cure is being developed somewhere. Maybe a national or international force will roll in and reclaim the city. Or maybe we'll be the ones to rebuild from the ground up, forging small communities until they link together. Either way, we can't just wait. We have to act. Build relationships, gather knowledge, secure resources. That's what Cynthia's group is doing, what the folks in Brooklyn seem to be doing, and what we all must do if we want a future beyond just surviving. Tonight, I want to highlight someone who's making a positive impact. Mia, a school teacher from the Lower East Side. She's taken it upon herself to look after a handful of kids who were orphaned or separated from their families during the evacuation attempts. She set up a makeshift classroom in a basement. She's teaching them basic literacy, math, even some history, anything to help them remember what life used to be. That might sound like a small thing in the grand scheme, but think about it. These kids are the next generation. If we lose our sense of education, we risk losing everything. Mia is proof that in the midst of chaos, compassion and dedication still shine through. If you're listening, Mia, thank you. Another word about the infected. Some folks are noticing advanced deterioration in certain groups. Movement patterns vary widely. A few survivors reported that some infected barely move at all, standing in place or leaning against walls, almost as if their bodies are giving out. Others remain alarmingly quick, especially if startled. There's no universal pattern, so always assume the worst-case scenario. Some speculate that the virus mutates with each host, or that environmental factors, temperature, humidity, time since infection, lead to different behaviors. We're all still learning. The key point is, never let down your guard. If you see one infected that looks sluggish, don't assume the rest will be the same. Believe it or not, earlier this evening I got a very faint AM signal from across the Hudson. It cut in and out, but I caught enough to realize it was a group broadcasting from somewhere near Jersey City or Hoboken. They claimed they'd secured the Newport Center Mall. If that's true, that mall had multiple floors, including a grocery store, clothing outlets, possibly a pharmacy. A self-contained fortress like that could be quite a stronghold if managed correctly. They mentioned that the main challenge was that lower-level entrances flood during heavy rains, forcing them to seal certain passages. But apparently they've got it under control. If you're in New Jersey, keep an ear out. Maybe you can coordinate with them if traveling is feasible. Hello again, survivors. This is Tanner Johnson, back on 530 AM for another round of Signals from the Underground. I hope you can hear me loud and clear, or at least clear enough. We've had some technical struggles, but for now, the generator hums on. The clock says 2100 hours, but time has lost much of its meaning since the city fell silent. Yesterday, I mentioned my friend Cynthia planned a pharmacy run near East 57th Street. I have an update. She and her group made it there, but not without trouble. She radioed me a few hours ago with the details. Here's what happened. They approached the pharmacy from a side street, hoping to avoid large groups of infected. The place was boarded up, exactly as I remembered. The front windows were shattered, though, and inside they found signs of a struggle, knocked over shelves, scattered pills. It looked like a lot of the prescription meds had been taken, but they did manage to find antiseptic wipes, gauze, some over-the-counter painkillers, and a small stock of cold medicine. Not a massive haul, but better than nothing. As they were leaving, a door at the back of the store burst open. 4 infected came stumbling out, a man wearing scrubs, another in casual clothes, and 2 others that were too decayed to identify. Cynthia's group had to react fast. One of her people, Marco, used a noise distraction they'd prepared, a small device that emits a high-pitched beep. He tossed it into another aisle, drawing the infected away. This gave them a precious few seconds to slip back outside. The plan worked until the beep died out. The infected then followed them onto the street. Cynthia says they ran 2 blocks east, moving as quietly yet swiftly as possible. Ultimately, the infected lost their trail, but not before a tense chase. No injuries, thankfully. They got the medical supplies home. That's a success story in my book. Cynthia's group is also excited because they fixed up an old generator of their own. With the battery packs they found, plus some leftover gas, they can power lights in their signals office for a few hours each day. That's a big morale boost. That scraping noise I mentioned continued last night, right after I signed off. I was in the corridor outside our broadcast room when I heard it again. Metal on concrete, slow, deliberate. It gave me chills. I followed it deeper into the service tunnels near the old City Hall station. For those who don't know, the City Hall station is an abandoned architectural gem from the early 1900s. Curved ceilings, ornate tiles. Beautiful, but very eerie in the dark. I found footprints in the dust. Human footprints, not drag marks typical of the infected. Fresh, too. Whoever they belonged to, they were wearing shoes with a distinct tread pattern, maybe boots. I called out softly, but no one answered. Further along, I spotted an old metal pipe on the ground, partially corroded, with fresh scratches on it that might match the scraping noise. Could someone have been dragging it as they moved? I have no proof this person means harm. They might be scouting, same as me, or maybe they're just lost. But until I know more, I'm telling my group to keep watch. If you're down here, friend, and you're listening, let's talk. We're not looking for conflict. We're all just trying to survive. We often focus on the physical threats from the infected, but don't forget the dangers of untreated wounds and common illnesses. With hospital access nearly impossible, even a small cut can escalate if it gets infected. Keep your living area clean. Yes, it's tough in a broken city, but do your best. Boil your water. If you find bleach or other disinfectants, store them properly and use them to sanitize surfaces, especially if you're in a shared living space. If you find any medical textbooks, like old first aid manuals, paramedic guides, or nursing handbooks, cherish them. Study them. That knowledge can make the difference between life and a dire situation. We no longer have the luxury of calling 911. We have to be our own medics. It's a strange feeling. Sometimes I lose track of how many days we've been in this new reality. The daily routine of broadcasting, scavenging, fortifying, resting, it all merges into a single haze. I recall my time working for the MTA, how I used to complain about the busy schedules and crowded subways. I'd give anything to see that normal hustle and bustle again, the streams of people in suits, tourists snapping selfies, the music of street performers echoing through the stations. It all feels like another lifetime. I think about what will happen if we ever regain control. Will the city be rebuilt to its former glory? Or will we create something altogether new? Smaller communities, reliant on local resources and old-fashioned neighborly support. If that day comes, I hope we remember the lessons learned in these tunnels. On a more personal note, our little group in the tunnels has grown. We took in a pair of survivors who stumbled across our broadcast room. Their names are Lydia and Carlos. Lydia worked at a bakery in Chinatown before all this, and Carlos was a postal worker from the Upper East Side. They'd been wandering the tunnels following the faint hum of our generator. They seemed friendly and cooperative, and after a quick quarantine check, we welcomed them in. Lydia even helped me patch up a tear in one of my backpacks. She's handy with a needle and thread. Carlos offered to run messages for us, playing courier in the tunnels. It's remarkable how people want to contribute when they find a semblance of stability. But that means we have more mouths to feed, more bodies to shelter, more resources to share. We'll manage. It's a good problem, having more survivors to watch our backs. They brought a few supplies of their own, including a small store of dried food. We're all thankful for that. Hello again, folks. Tanner Johnson here, broadcasting to you from beneath the streets of Manhattan. It's around 2100 hours, though the exact time's always a bit iffy these days. If you're tuning in to 530 AM, congratulations. You found the one broadcast that's still scratching through the static in this city of shadows. I'm going to jump right into the big news. I decided to take Cynthia up on her offer. Tomorrow morning, just after sunrise, I'll be heading to her location near 59th and Lexington. We're planning to explore that rumored network of maintenance and communication tunnels. She's been gathering gear, flashlights, headlamps, rope, water, and some rations. I'll bring what knowledge I have of the MTA systems. Together, we'll see if it's possible to walk a path from Midtown to Lower Manhattan without tangling with too many infected. This mission is risky. We could run into structural collapses, flooding, or locked doors we can't bypass. Worst case scenario, we get trapped or cornered. But if it works, imagine the possibilities. A safer corridor for supply runs, rescues, and even travel between different survivor enclaves. It might change the game for all of us. I'll admit I'm nervous. My group here depends on me for guidance. And if something goes wrong, I'm not sure how they'll cope. But we can't stay in one place forever, can we? Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, or in this case, a cautious step into the unknown. A reminder. Firearms can be both a blessing and a curse. Yes, they're powerful. But the noise can attract infected from blocks away. Some survivors swear by silent weapons, bows, crossbows, spears, or simple clubs. If you do carry a firearm, be mindful of muzzle flashes and the echo in enclosed spaces. In the tunnels, gunfire can sound like an explosion, drawing every threat in the vicinity. I personally carry a small 9mm sidearm with a modest suppressor. Not perfect, but it reduces some noise. I also keep a sturdy crowbar for close encounters. The crowbar doubles as a tool for prying open locked doors, which is invaluable underground. I stepped outside briefly this morning to check a vent shaft and felt a sharp chill in the air. I'm no meteorologist, but it's definitely getting colder. If you're not prepared for low temperatures, find blankets or coats. Hypothermia can set in more easily than you'd expect, especially if you get wet. Keep your clothing dry, layer up, and consider building small fires in safe, ventilated areas if you have the means. Before I wrap up for the night and get some rest for tomorrow's expedition, I want to remind everyone why these broadcasts matter. We're forging connections in a fractured world. Each voice that calls in or writes a message, each handshake we share when we meet new survivors. It's a thread tying us together. Little by little, we weave a net that keeps us from sinking into isolation. Yes, it's dangerous out there. Yes, we're all carrying scars from this ordeal, mental and physical. But we're still here. We still have the capacity to plan, to hope, to dream. No outbreak can strip away our ability to care for each other so long as we refuse to let it. I'll end tonight's broadcast on that note. If all goes well, I'll have a big update after our journey through those hidden tunnels. Wish me luck, and I'll do the same for you. This is Tanner Johnson, the Tunnel Rat, signing off on 5:30 a.m. Hang in there, everyone. We will persevere. I'm back. Tanner Johnson here, feeling exhausted but alive, and with quite a story to tell. If you've been keeping up, you know I joined Cynthia and her group on a quest to explore a rumored network of maintenance tunnels. It took us the better part of a day, but we've returned with news. Some good, some not so good. Let's start at the beginning. I arrived at 59th and Lexington around dawn, slipping out of my own tunnels just before sunrise. The city streets were cold, quiet. I saw only a handful of infected in the distance, too far to notice me. Eventually, I reached the agreed-upon manhole cover, rapped our code, 3 short knocks, pause, 2 short knocks, and was met by Cynthia's people waiting below. What? We spent the next hour doing final checks, headlamps, flashlights, batteries, ropes, first aid supplies, some basic tools. Then we descended into the sub-level, heading toward an old communication hub that once carried fiber optic cables. The corridor's air was stale, the walls damp. Our footsteps echoed, and every noise made my heart pound, anticipating infected lurking in the dark. For a while, it was smooth going. We found old signage labeling the tunnels, Comvault 4, Power Conduit 7, that sort of thing. Cynthia had a map, a real printed blueprint from the MTA archives. We used it to guide us through junctions, checking each passage for collapse or flood. Some areas were blocked by cave-ins, forcing us to backtrack. Others were passable, though partially submerged in water that ranged from ankle-deep to knee-deep. Thank goodness we wore waterproof boots. After hours of careful progress, we reached a large chamber filled with rusted equipment. Looked like old emergency generators, maybe from the 1970s. That's when we heard it. A distinct rattling of metal deeper in the tunnel. We killed our lights and listened. It sounded like someone, human or infected, was dragging something across the floor. My mind flashed back to the scraping noises I heard in my own tunnels. We waited, hearts hammering, barely daring to breathe. Then silence. We pressed on, deciding we couldn't abandon the mission at the first sign of potential trouble. A few minutes later, the passage opened into a larger corridor, presumably an old water main or utility route. That's where we found the remains of a campsite. Empty cans. A soot-stained pot. A pile of blankets. Recently used, maybe days old. No sign of the occupant. We whispered among ourselves, wondering if this was the same mysterious figure from my tunnel. Continuing forward, we discovered a partial cave-in. Rubble blocked the path, and we spent nearly an hour clearing a small gap large enough to squeeze through. On the other side lay something that took our breath away. A wide, open thoroughfare, sloping downward toward lower Manhattan. It was exactly what we'd hoped for, a hidden artery that might bypass the infected streets above. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses. The place reeked of stagnant water and decay. We kept our lights low, stepping over piles of debris, broken pipes, tangled wires, bits of glass. And that's when we saw them. Not one or two, but a group of infected in the corridor ahead. They were standing oddly still, like statues in the darkness, maybe a dozen yards from us. Our group froze. Cynthia motioned for everyone to back up. We did so carefully, but the water rippled around our feet, and the infected suddenly stirred. One let out a guttural moan, turning its head in our direction. We had nowhere to run. Behind us was the rubble we'd just cleared. Panic gripped me. Luckily, Marco, the same guy who used a noise distraction at the pharmacy, had brought another device. He activated it, a small rig that emitted a high-frequency screech. He tossed it to the side and the infected lunged toward that noise, giving us enough time to slip down a narrow side passage. We held our breath as the infected stumbled past us in the murk, drawn by the screeching echo. When they were gone, we hurried as quietly as we could in the opposite direction, eventually emerging into an area marked Water Flow Control. This place had multiple corridors leading off in different directions. Unfortunately, the path we originally wanted, heading farther south, was infested. We faced a choice: try to slip by them again or retreat and find another route. After a quick debate, we decided it was too risky to press on. We'd already gotten a partial mapping of the tunnels. Better to return with what we had than gamble everything. The journey back was equally tense, but we managed to avoid any major encounters. Finally, we climbed up near 59th and Lex, hearts pounding, clothes soaked and dirty. We parted ways. Cynthia's group, though disappointed we hadn't cleared the route fully, was encouraged by the fact that it's at least partly navigable. With more planning, and maybe more people, we might find a way around or through that infected cluster. I'm back in my broadcast booth now, feeling every muscle ache from the day's exertion, but I also feel a renewed sense of possibility. That tunnel might not be fully passable yet, but it's there, a hidden highway under Manhattan. With enough caution and the right gear, we could potentially link entire sections of the city without stepping above ground. I'll admit I'm exhausted. My nerves are shot from that close call with the infected. But I'm also excited. It feels like the first major step toward regaining some measure of control over this city. If we can secure even part of that route, imagine the supply runs and rescue missions that could happen. We wouldn't be forced to risk the open streets as much. This might be a piece of the puzzle that helps us slowly but surely reclaim territory from the infected. Now, I'm not suggesting we'll have a fully functioning underground freeway overnight. We're talking about a massive, deteriorating, and partially infested labyrinth. But every big challenge starts with one step. If you're out there, if you have skills in construction, engineering, or even just bravery, keep this in mind. The tunnels are a potential lifeline. In closing, I want to emphasize how crucial it is that we keep sharing these stories, these small victories, and these cautionary tales. Every time we trade information, we become a bit smarter, a bit safer. We're building a mosaic of knowledge across the city. Yes, the infected remain a massive threat, and resources grow thin. But look at us, still alive, still pushing boundaries, still exploring ways to outmaneuver this crisis. So don't give up hope. Don't let the darkness convince you that you're alone. We are all part of something bigger. A resilient community stitched together by radio waves, whispered stories, and the will to see another day. I'll be back on the air tomorrow night, generator permitting. Until then, stay hidden if you must. Stand tall when you can, and remember that each breath you take is an act of defiance against the despair trying to claim this city. For now, this is Tanner Johnson, the Tunnel Rat, signing off from beneath Manhattan. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other.